Morning, everyone. I see we have a few people. That's nice. Just wait a bit for everyone else to join. Not too long. We're trying to be punctual here. Yeah, in the meantime, you can say where you're connecting from. Between Maggie and me, we already have 2 countries, but maybe we have more than that. Yeah, so we already have Paris and London over there. How is it going for you? North Wales, nice. I'm going to learn my British geography today, which is very bad, but my French one is also bad. So, Rochester Games, nice. What I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly start. I'm going to present the platform to you so some more people can join, and then we will dive into the topic of today's masterclass. So, first off, thank you all for being here. As you've already seen, you have a few ways to communicate today with us during that webinar. So you can, as you've already began, speak in the chat. You can also see and answer some polls that we're going to be publishing throughout the whole webinar. So there should be like 2 polls for you, and then 1 at the end to know if you enjoyed this Real Tech Masterclass. You can also ask questions. So it is easier for us if you ask your questions in the questions tab, because then they're all in the same place. And also you can upvote someone else's question. So if someone else asks a question that you find interesting, you can upvote it to show your interest, and we will take these questions in priority. And for your information, we'll take the questions at the end of the webinar. See, the chat was here, you know that. And yeah, when you see that little icon popping up, it means that a new poll or survey was uploaded, so you can go and answer that directly. So today we are welcoming Maggie Simpson from Rail Freight Group as a speaker to talk about innovation and rail freight growth in the UK. So thank you, Maggie, for being here. Really happy to have you. And I will let you speak about yourself a little bit.
Thank you very much, Katia, and a pleasure to be here. As you've just said, I'm Maggie Simpson, and I'm the Director General of the Rail Freight Group. We are a member-led trade association representing rail freight in the UK. We have around 130 businesses who are members of our organisation, ranging from the rail freight train operators, end customers, so people who consign their goods by rail, which includes businesses such as construction companies, retail businesses, logistics companies, industrial organisations, but we also represent ports, quarries, equipment suppliers, developers, support services and supply chain, and a whole host of businesses who are helping rail freight to prosper in the UK. And our goal as an organisation is very simple. We are working to increase the amount of goods that is moved by rail freight in the UK. In terms of our relationship with businesses across mainland Europe, we have relationships with other organisations such as UIRR and AIRFA, who are representing businesses across Europe. And some of our members, including Eversense, who we're working with today, are obviously pan-European businesses working not only in the UK, but across Europe and indeed the globe. And it's brilliant to be able to share expertise, learn from each other, and enjoy the best practice that comes from looking at the global level at how people are working to grow rail freight.
Nice, thank you for your introduction. So we'll talk more about what the rail freight does in more details, and what your members do as well during the webinar. And as for EverySense, so I am Katia, so I will be hosting today. So I'm working for EverySense, which is so hosting this RedTech Masterclass. What is EverySense for people that do not know us? So basically, we have developed what we call a TVMS. So it's basically like a TMS, but we have added a layer of visibility to it. And so our own goal is to digitize all the industrial rail transport processes across Europe. And of course, that includes the UK. We're integrated with the ecosystem, but we work with freight forwarders, railway undertakers, anyone that makes sense in this ecosystem and that is working directly with the shippers. And you have a couple of the people that we work with on the screen. And lastly, before we dive into the topic, I also wanted to talk to you about the RailTech community. So you're currently participating to RailTech Masterclass, which are the webinars of the RailTech community. So what is the RailTech community? It's a group, and like truly a community, like the name says, that we've launched recently to create a place for European rail freight professionals to meet and to exchange and to share knowledge. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create exclusive content, exclusive events for like-minded people in the rail freight industry. And so big part of that are the RailTech Masterclasses, where we try to invite speakers such as Maggie that have a true value and true insights to bring to you all. And if you want more information, you can either contact me directly, or you also receive it in the email, follow-up email that you receive at the end of that webinar. Because you will receive a replay of the webinar at the end. Do not worry if you need to leave in the middle of it. You will receive a replay. That was my last mention of me and EverySense for now. I will leave the floor to Maggie, and we can truly start the webinar now. So yeah, Maggie will let you put up your slides. Also, we're gonna have a survey popping up for you that you can answer, and maybe we'll have the time to directly address it during the presentation. So yeah, Maggie, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Katia, and it's, as I said, an absolute pleasure to be speaking to you all today on this RailTech Masterclass. And I think it's so important, particularly in the technology and innovation space, to have events like this where people can share knowledge, ask questions, find out what other people are doing, and learn about how that innovation and that technology is happening, learning from global players. So it's a real pleasure to be here. In terms of what I wanted to speak to you about today, really I thought in two parts. Firstly, just to give an overview of where rail freight is in the UK, in our economy and in our railway and political environment, thinking about growth, and then talking about how innovation and technology is a fundamental part of delivering both for the country, but also those growth ambitions. And how, frankly, we won't do it if we don't make progress on that. So, but to start with, let me just talk to you a little bit about rail freight in the UK. Some of you online will be familiar with these statistics. We use them quite a lot in our work. We think that rail freight, and this is a fairly conservative estimate, I think, but delivering somewhere around 2.7 billion euros in economic benefits to the UK economy each year. And that's coming through environmental savings, but also benefits to business, where rail freight can be more cost effective or more reliable, or deliver that that resilience that businesses need. We save around about 8.2 million lorry miles a year from the very crowded road network that we have in this country. Freight trains on average making 76% less carbon dioxide than road freight, even though in the UK most freight trains are still using diesel rather than overhead electricity. We're still only making a quarter of the carbon of road freight. And the rail freight operators alone employ over 6,500 people right across the UK. And that's before we include the people who work in customers and supply chain and other sectors that are also helping rail freight to thrive. And when I look at the UK market and the drivers of rail freight at the moment, what we're seeing is an incredibly strong trend from customers of rail freight and companies right across the economy who are wanting to use more rail freight and are investing their money, their resources, their time to help do that. And they're doing that for the simple reason that they want to decarbonise their supply chains. The pressure to be greener, more sustainable and reduce carbon is getting, ever stronger. And boardrooms have set ambitious targets, both for the long term, maybe 2040, 2050, but also the shorter term steps that they need to take to get there. And using more rail freight today, particularly where you can do so on the longer distance parts of your supply chain, is an incredibly important and relatively easy way of making carbon savings today. And we're seeing the investment going in to back that. Just some examples on this slide. Top left is an automotive flow, which is running from the English Midlands, loaded with finished automobiles produced in the UK, going out to Eastern Europe, the Czech Republic, and coming back the other way, loaded with vehicles made in the Czech Republic for import into the UK. We're seeing companies like DP World on the top right, who are a major ports group, actually running, in that case, an incentive scheme, encouraging businesses at their port estate to use more rail freight to fill up the trains that are going out from that port. At the bottom right, we're seeing construction businesses using more rail freight as part of their operation, moving crushed rock, sand and other products into construction sites across the UK. And we're also seeing sites, bottom left there, that's East Midlands Gateway, but major sites of rail-linked warehousing coming at pace across the country, putting those people who are storing, warehousing their goods next door to a railhead, making using rail really cost-effective and easy for those businesses. And with huge success at getting those warehouse businesses to work together on new products and new trains. The growth in rail freight hasn't been missed by government either. We've been talking to governments, the main Westminster government, but also in the devolved administrations in Scotland and in Wales about rail freight. And it's been really rewarding to see that the message has been landing. And recently, governments have been setting targets to see rail freight grow. Last December, the Westminster government have set a target of 75% growth in rail freight by 2050. And we've got more short-term targets set by government as well. In England and Wales in the next 5 years, 7.5%. And in Scotland, set by Scottish government, 8.7% in the next 5 years. And it's really great to have these targets set, because what we're seeing as a consequence of governments saying they want rail freight to grow is we're seeing people behave differently, particularly within Network Rail, who run the track and the train in the UK, and other providers of services, local government, and indeed in the civil service in Whitehall, behaviours which is now focused around delivering growth. And of course, we have a general election in the UK on the 4th of July, slightly just a week or two after the election in France. So interesting times. But what we need to be pushing for is continued support from whichever party forms up the next government. So at Rail Freight Group, we've produced recently our manifesto called Delivered by Rail Freight. You can find it on our website or get in touch if you haven't seen it. And this sets out our commitments, what we as an industry will do to help the next government's ambitions for the economy, the environment, for communities, or so on, but also what our key asks are of the new government. And that includes those things that we need to deliver the growth target. And we've been really pleased to see that in the manifestos that have been published by the main political parties in the last few weeks, the three largest parties, Conservative, Labour and Liberal Democrats, have all reiterated that support for rail freight growth, promising a continuation of that target, whoever forms up the next government. So whilst, of course, we need to continue making the case, continue pressing for rail freight to be part of new government's thinking, I'm really pleased to see that we've got that cross-party support in those manifestos, and that whoever comes in have already said they've shown their commitment to continuing to grow rail freight. I'm often asked, of course, where we think that growth will come from. What are the places, the locations and the products that are going to form part of that growth? And I think, for all of us who work in rail freight, we know we're always going to be surprised that new flows appear where we weren't expecting them. New customers appear, people find ways of putting goods on trains that we haven't thought of yet. And of course, if you reflect on your own behaviours, you're buying things in shops now that you weren't buying 5 years ago. And so we drive a demand for freight by the choices that we make. But even so, I think despite that, we can see some areas where we know that there's significant potential for growth in the UK. I've talked a little bit already about construction materials, such as crushed rock and sand. And we know that there will be growth supporting major projects. So whether that's infrastructure for power generation, whether it's more railway building, or even new homes, schools, towns and communities, there are opportunities to use more rail freight to bring those construction materials to where they're needed. And we're also seeing that market change in itself. There's an increased amount of recyclables, perhaps sea-dredged sand particularly, and some increases in imported goods as well. So significant potential in those new products to use more rail. Already in the UK, we move a huge amount of goods out from the nation's ports. We're a small island, we import and export a lot, and rail freight is increasing its ability to move goods out from those big ports. But we're also seeing the potential for new routes for port traffic, a lot of investment going in on what we'd call the Transpennine routes, linking Manchester and Leeds, potential for there to be new services on that as those routes are upgraded in the next 5 to 10 years, and more growth capability out from the existing sites as well. I've touched a little bit on putting warehouses next to railheads, and that's really helping domestic retailers put more goods on rail. The picture there is of Tesco, one of the largest supermarkets, but also we're seeing people looking at high-speed parcel traffic. We're seeing other retail companies working together to try and get freight moving, and we're even seeing a resurgence of very small packages moving on some passenger trains, using space on the margin for the particular niche flows. And the final area, and one which I think is really exciting, is where rail freight can help other businesses to decarbonise their own activities. And so in that space, we're seeing things like the potential to move scrap metal, which will be needed if we're going to convert steel making into electric arc technology. And there are potentials for moving alternative fuels, maybe liquid hydrogen, liquid carbon, which are going to be used by other businesses to help decarbonise, whether that's in carbon capture and storage, or in making and transporting hydrogen for wherever it's being used, for places where it's being created most often, perhaps at the coast. So a huge potential there for rail freight to play a role that it isn't playing today. But if we're going to deliver that growth, meet those government targets, then we need to overcome a number of challenges that we have. So some of the challenges that I've listed here, I think, are probably common across Europe, actually, but particularly in the UK. We know that we need more capacity on the railway for new services to operate. We know that we have some bottlenecks on the network where there isn't enough capacity to meet the demands of freight alongside those of the passenger railway, which of course is also growing. We know that we need to improve productivity. We need to reduce track charges so that the cost of rail is competitive for customers compared to the alternative road freight. We know we need to make rail freight simpler for customers. It can be a confusing ecosystem. It doesn't work or feel like road freight, which our customers are often used to. So we need to try and make it easier for them. We ourselves need to decarbonise and have a narrative about how we're producing less carbon and becoming more sustainable, reducing our emissions. And some of those new markets are going to have particular challenges. For example, if we're going to be moving into products like hydrogen or carbon, we're going to need to look at the safety rules and the technology that surrounds them. And when I look at those challenges, I can see that solving those and making progress is going to need us to work really hard on innovation and on technology. And Katya, I think, are we having another survey?
Yes. So we can talk about the results of the first survey. So it was regarding what the audience thought was the main challenge to growth for rail freight customers, and quite overwhelmingly, everyone is answering cost, and which I think is not a big surprise, as you've already mentioned, that the cost of rail can actually be higher than road currently. So yeah, that's something we're also trying to work at Eversense, right? We're trying to reduce the cost of rail for our shipper customers. Is that let's say a surprising answer for you, or were you also expecting that cost would be a higher challenge compared to, for example, visibility and collaboration, which are also challenges but maybe less overwhelming?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely is a challenge because there is a price, a cost. No, there is a benefit to businesses in being seen to be sustainable, but obviously part of being sustainable is also about being cost effective and not passing on excessive costs to your own customers, whether that's consumers or other industries. So it's absolutely right that businesses are very keen on what their transport costs are and are being efficient in that. I think, one of the challenges that we have in rail is, of course, that we have very significant sort of fixed costs, that the equipment we use is expensive, has very long asset life compared to road. And road can simply be more fluid in its pricing and more responsive. And particularly, in the UK economy recently, we've had a bit of an economic dip, and that will generally drive down road prices. And then when, as the economy picks back up, road prices will probably increase again. And so rail's costs aren't that flexible. We tend to suffer at that. But nonetheless, we need to be doing things to make sure that we are as cost competitive as we can be. And that, is a mixture, I think, of sort of industry action around, productivity, around making sure the trains are as long as they can be, as well loaded as they can be, that they're running reliably, that we're using those assets as much as we possibly can, so that we're using the fewest number of wagons, for example, that we can be using to get away, to move the volume that we've got. But then there are also things that we need to be talking to government and to, the rail industry about, and track charges are an example of that. We've seen some very significant increases in track charges recently compared to fuel duty, for example, which is static in the UK. For good reasons, but that difference is driving a wedge between rail and road costs. So I think, we need to be talking to government really clearly about how rail freight is priced on the network, about the other costs that we incur by being on rail rather than on road, and trying to make progress both within the industry itself, but also in that policy space. I think there'll be some interesting conversations in future around how the roads are priced, for example, with a move to more electric vehicles, electric HGVs. So there's some opportunities there.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting how you speak about, for example, being supported by governments and government policies, but also, let's say, the economic situation in the UK recently. Do you feel like some of these challenges that you've talked about? You mentioned that they're obviously European wide as well, but do you feel like some of them are more inherent or more present in the UK due to economic situation or even geographical situation? Like, you're surrounded by water, so you kind of have to have good relationship with ports as well to do interflow and to make sure that the flow is good even with the other European countries.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I mean, we're a small island, so the distances that goods move across the UK are far smaller than they are in mainland Europe, and we know that rail works really well over long distances, and its costs can be more challenging over shorter distances. Although, there are plenty of examples of short distance flows that do work, but I think if you look at the length and scale of some of the traffics that can move across Europe, across countries, actually, it's brilliant to see, and we don't have that advantage in the UK. Some of the journeys can be short, and of course we didn't exactly help ourselves with Brexit in terms of some of the barriers that we've put at the border, which has changed some of the trade flows. Also, it has impacted on some of that balance of import and export, which, rail works really well when you can fill a train up in both directions, and some of those trade imbalances are unhelpful. But I think there are some commonalities as well. Across Europe, the passenger railway is, recovering from COVID, and it's brilliant to see that. But that's starting to raise those capacity challenges as well, that had maybe receded a little bit. There is need for investment in the network, in different ways and in different places. But we know that those bottlenecks exist in lots of countries, and finding the money to invest now is challenging. So trying to understand how we make the best of the network that we've got, how freight can play a bigger part on the railways than perhaps it has done in the past. Those are also, I think, common issues. And one of the things, we certainly see, if I look at my colleagues across all the freight modes, whether that's road freight, rail freight, sea freight, wherever, is it's often invisible to government, frankly, because it works a lot of the time. People's goods do turn up, the shops generally are full. Things are where they need to be, and people forget about the freight network and the need of it. We always say freight doesn't vote, so people often aren't making noise politically about the freight network. So we need to work together to keep the visibility of rail freight really high with policymakers, who often overlook it when they're thinking about the passenger networks and the challenges that they have there.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, definitely. It's difficult to move things if you're like alone on your own side and not having a greater and more general support. And however, I do think that I'm jumping ahead on what you're going to say afterwards, but when I look at all these challenges, I think we share that vision of you can help to resolve a lot of them thanks to technology. At least that's what we're trying to do on our side, is to digitize the rail freight operations and to try to make things easier for shippers and the rest of the ecosystem, try to reduce costs. So do you, before we go forward, do you feel like a company, let's say, or a shipper that's not digitizing its rail freight operations is maybe losing opportunities or closing some doors because of that?
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. And I think you can look at this in lots of ways, and we'll come on to some examples in a moment. But clearly, when you get innovation and technology right, you can immediately see that you can increase productivity. For example, you can make life safer in some cases. Things like digital signalling, which I'm not going to talk about, but they can help with track capacity bottlenecks, things like that. So a lot of those challenges can be very specifically targeted by the right technology in the right place. But I think that there's sort of a wider point as well. So, you know, if I look at my children, for example, they were born under the shadow of the internet. You know, when I started work, it hadn't been invented. But, you know, these are people who, you know, have known that all their life. So they're going to want to come and work in a sector. They don't want to be using fax machines or pieces of paper or spreadsheets. That, you know, they're expecting to come into businesses who are using, you know, state-of-the-art systems. So if we want to employ the best people, we need to be responding to that. And actually, if we want to be talking to politicians and, as I've said, gaining them, keeping their support, we need to look like we are, you know, an outward-looking, modern, fit-for-purpose sector who are equipping themselves for the future. So investing in technology and in innovation doesn't just help the specifics of the challenge, it also helps that background, that mood music, the way we look and feel for customers, but also, you know, to our staff and to the key stakeholders that we need to be talking to. So it's not, you know, it isn't a choice really for me. We have to do it, have to make progress.
Yeah, we have to make progress. I like that. So let's see what the audience thinks regarding technology in rail freight. So you guys have a new poll that's up. Just to know, what do you think rail freight customers most need from technology? You have a few options, and if none of them feel right to you, you can also just type your answer in the chat. And in the meantime, I think Maggie also has some examples regarding technology that you can speak about and share.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So there are so many good examples, and so I've just picked a few today. And you know, if I haven't picked, you know, if you're listening and you've got a great example that I haven't picked, then you know, sorry, but please come and talk to us about it, because you know we're really keen to share what our members are doing in this space and support that. So these are just a few examples of things that, you know, we're aware of. And actually, I wanted to, you know, spare Katya's blushes really and start by talking about the Eversense system, which, you know, is being rolled out with Tarmac, who are an RFG member, looking at their logistics and terminal management systems across Europe, but also in the UK. And lots of details in that, which I'm sure Katya or the team could talk to you about it in more detail if you wanted to. But the bit that's been really exciting for me in there is the way that these systems have been able to integrate with some actually, you know, fairly historic network systems that we have in the UK. TOPS is a fairly ancient system, frankly, that underpins the rail freight network in the UK. But Eversense have been able to interrogate it and use it to show real life operation for their customers, which is something that simply we haven't got in UK rail freight, and so these customers now can see exactly where their train's on the network. If it's running late, they'll know it's running late, and they can adjust their terminals accordingly. That might be, you know, allowing staff to go home, or changing shifts, or holding them back, or reprogramming their onward road deliveries, or whatever else they need to have, because they've now got that visibility in real time of what's going on. And it's a really great example of you know, making it less complicated for our customers, because whilst big customers like Tarmac will no doubt have, you know, some people in the business who are experts on rail, lots of the people that rail is engaging with are not experts. They're people who are experts on the core business of those companies, whatever that is, whether in this case it's aggregates or whether it's ports or whatever. So we need to make it simple by using systems like this. And, you know, there are many others out there that people are looking at to try and integrate. Because the other thing that we have to do is try and help rail become integrated with the systems that customers are using for other modes, whether that's roads or shipping. You know, they'll want to be able to look at everything holistically, and we'll get the best outcome when they can do that. So there are several other systems out there helping customers book onto rail, track consignments, and this is a really great example of that integration between old systems and new technology to deliver some real benefits for customers. Another example I wanted to share is around wagons, and you know, wagons has been a really exciting place recently, because there are so many people looking at different systems which will help to put digital capabilities on wagons. If you look at most wagons running around in the UK, and I'm sure running around in Europe as well, they are fairly light on technology. You know, it's the bogies are very clever bits of engineering. There's a box on top which is perhaps, you know, got some clever engineering on it, but from a digital point of view, they're pretty inert. The locomotive doesn't talk to them, customers don't talk to them, they're just there. So we're seeing a number of systems coming to look at how we can improve that. The one that I'm showing you on the slide there is the iWagon, which has been developed by VTG, a big European wagon company, and Norbrem's a technology supplier particularly skilled in braking systems. And this is a wagon that they're out on test at the moment, and they're equipped both with digital systems and sensors, but also with wheel slide prevention systems, which are helping to prevent wheel flats, axle locks, and prevent wheel damage. And the key elements of this system, and indeed many of the other systems that are also being looked at, is trying to work out how you can fit power onto the wagon, in this case through an axle-based system, how you can fit transmission onto a wagon so that it can send information back, and how you can add the sensors onto that. And you know, a lot of that is about safety features, whether that's axle lock, derailment detection, handbrakes, but it could also be about quality. For example, if we've got hazardous goods or particularly sensitive goods on a wagon, it could be about information about loading and unloading, about uneven loading, for example. It could be weather sensing, it could be interacting with the track. All sorts of different things become possible once we put that technology onto a wagon. And it's really exciting because these systems, you know, I'm certain will help to improve safety, but also can provide business benefits through better condition understanding, better asset management, and really helping drive productivity, improving the availability of wagons on the network. So it's a hugely exciting space. This is one example. There are other systems out there, but those, you know, these are seeing the first customer orders of the iWagon now, which is brilliantly exciting. In a similar space, we're also seeing people in rail freight moving more into remote condition monitoring. This is an example being trialled by GB Rail Freight on some of their wagons, being linked into maintenance scheduling and fault finding, which, you know, in the case of this example, being linked into a new maintenance facility. You know, remote condition monitoring isn't new technology. It's been around for many years in other sectors, but actually seeing it coming into rail freight is really exciting because, you know, it can really help with that productivity, getting the same amount of product moved with fewer wagons or fewer locomotives, but also it can help improve the working conditions for our staff. So often, because freight locomotives go literally over the whole country, those faults can happen in all sorts of places, and so staff are often consigned out to places that aren't the perfect work sites. They're working in suboptimal conditions in some cases, and so by making progress on things like remote monitoring, not only are we improving the way we can schedule maintenance, but we're enabling that maintenance to be done in ways which is better quality for the staff, and that in turn will help improve the diversity of our workforce, encourage more people in, and help with that recruitment and retention of staff, which we know we need. So it's another example of where innovation and that digital technology is going to help us in so many different aspects, as well as the most obvious one around improving productivity. And I also just wanted to talk a little bit about the sort of research and R&D that's going on, and the innovation that are being looked at in that space. So this is just the one example. So RSSB, the Rail Safety and Standards Board in the UK, the organisation who look after the core industry standards that everybody in the railways must adhere to, but they also lead on industry research and development, and they manage something called the Rail Technical Strategy, which sets out the framework of research and R&D, which is going to be promoted over the period. And they've just republished the Rail Technical Strategy with a new freight section, looking at the priorities which are going to be taken forward in the next few years. So if you're not aware of that programme, it really is worth getting involved in it, because there's some really good research that's been done over the years, including on areas around low carbon freight, increasing speed, looking at how we work in collaboration around some of the safety aspects. And the one I just wanted to highlight was some work which has been done a couple of years ago, looking at coupler strength, so how much weight a coupler can bear, which has a direct correlation to how long a train can be, particularly if it's going on a challenging part of the network with, high gradients or particular challenges, which might sometimes limit the length of train that can operate. And the rules around coupler strengths have been set. They've not been looked at for many years. Over that time, wagons have innovated and changed, couplers have changed, and it was overdue some research to see whether it could be updated. And there was some brilliant work done by a company called Rail Freight Consulting, who created a digital model to test different scenarios. And what that work has shown is that without doing anything at all to the systems, there are many trains on the network that could operate with more wagons completely safely within the strength of the couplers. And that would show that those customers can have greater productivity. They can move more product on each train than they expected, without having to spend any money at all on modifying wagons or anything else. So it's a really great example of where modernising the fundamental rules that we're running our network on can yield really good, impactful work, really good productivity gains. And so it's sort of innovation from a different light, by using digital models and digital research to refresh and update some of those standards that are out there. And there are other similar projects being undertaken and the work happening with RSSB, so please do have a look at that. And finally, I just wanted to pull out some examples or some thoughts really from me about how collectively we can drive forward progress on this area, because there's some brilliant examples that I've just shown you, but there are also some bits that are quite complicated and difficult in moving forward and moving the dial. And so some things that I've seen happening that really help drive forward that innovation and digital space. Collaboration is a word that gets overused, I think, and we are in a highly competitive environment, and sometimes competition is in itself a really strong force causing people to innovate. But actually we do need to work together to help unlock solutions, and I think some of the collaborations we've seen there between RSSB and the industry, or between different suppliers to bring products together, are really important to help build progress, and actually to bring in real live experience, perhaps from other sectors, whether that's the passenger railway, road freight, or other sectors altogether, where we're seeing that those innovations happening. So collaboration is absolutely key to that, respecting the competitive environment, but finding ways to work together to drive forward innovation that works. A really important part of that, I think, is to understand where we need a common approach, particularly where we're handling data, and where actually we don't need a common approach. So I think if we looked at some of the systems which are going to be generating information that might be safety critical, it's going to be essential that we've got some common approaches to that, so that people in train operator control, for example, or perhaps even train drivers, can get the same information in the same format from the different systems which could be implemented by customers, so that they know consistently and in the same way if an incident is happening. Whereas other data might actually be best in the commercial space, so that businesses can use that to drive the business cases they need to make the investments. So we need to think really carefully about common data and how we can promote that. And actually within the UK, there's something called the Rail Data Marketplace, which is being promoted by government, where it provides a safe space for people to put common data, open data, and for other people to come along and innovate using that data in a respectful way. So there's some really good examples for how we can do that. One of the challenges that we get presented with is that the business cases for innovation can be really complicated, and they can be, because benefits are often hard to understand, they're hard to price, and they can sometimes fall between parties, between a customer and a wagon provider, between Network Rail and a freight train operator, between multiple parties. So we need to look at holistically where those benefits arise from, and try and work out how we can make a business case for the person that's making the investment in the most effective way. And that can be complicated. And I think there's some work to be done on sharing best practice in that, to looking at how we can price things that perhaps are less obvious, and seeing how, where benefits are shared, how we can work together to build the business cases for making those investments. And finally, I think, as you know, we do need to build digital competence. It is, you know, it is really complicated. You know, Katia and others saw me struggling to get my camera to turn on earlier before this webinar started. You know, we all struggle in this space, and it's incredibly fast moving. It's got a jargon all of its own. So we need to think about how we're going to build that competence and awareness in the industry. Essential that we bring people with us on this journey, because when we're implementing new systems in the workplace, we need that buy-in and that industry support. So how do we build competence? How do we build awareness? We've put on a digital forum for our members to try and help people learn more about what's happening in the space. But a lot more to be done, I think, in helping our employees, our staff, and in people across the industry build that competence, knowledge, and that comfort in that data-driven approach. But when we do that, we can really start to bring people with us and help those systems to get implemented. And so that was all from me. And so, Katia, back to you, I think, for some questions.
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much for all of that presentation. It was very interesting, as expected. So before we dive into the question, we already have two lined up. If someone has another question, please, we can put it into the question section. Before we do that, let's have a look at the second survey that we launched regarding technology. So without any surprise, reducing costs is the main answer that came up with how can technology help basically with our customers and what they need most from it. And it was closely followed by improving safety and reliability, which makes sense again and fits what you are saying during your examples. I'm thinking at the top of my head with iWagons as well. Yeah, it's basically using technology to make the ecosystem easier and also more safe, and of course to reduce cost, as we already discussed that, as it is quite a big issue a lot of the time.
Yeah, no, I mean, those answers don't surprise me at all. And I think if you look at, you know, any other industry, they're using technology to reduce costs and to make life easier and better and safer for people. So it's not a surprise that will also be a big demand in rail freight. And I think if you know, productivity has improved massively in rail freight over time, but there is always more to do, And I think looking at how we use our very expensive assets as much as we possibly can is probably the next place where we're going to get those productivity savings. So whether that's making the trains longer, whether it's loading them better, whether it's finding ways to schedule assets so that we get more out from them, some really exciting opportunities there. And we'll do that when we've got more knowledge of them, and you know, data-driven systems are going to help us to do that. Yeah,
knowledge is key, always. Okay, great. Let's move on to the questions now. So I was saying we have two of them. They both have been voted a couple of times, so thank you guys for using that feature. We'll start with the one from Michael, which has been voted 3 times. Maggie, if you want to read it directly, you have it on the question tab. I'll read it aloud again, but maybe it's easier since it's a bit long, maybe easier to compute if you read it. So the question is, on challenges to both, can you say something about the role and value of terminals needed for the transfer of freight from one mode to another? And also, do you have any thoughts on how the high upfront capital commitments can be addressed, particularly in areas that are peripheral to the main urban markets? Maybe you can split that into lots of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, look, terminals are hugely important because, you know, they are our passenger stations, aren't they? You can't load or unload freight without having the right terminals in the right places. And as we move into some of the, newer sectors that might emerge, we are going to probably need different things out from those sites. And, the network of terminals that we've got today in some parts of the market is quite focused on, the core network. And as Michael rightly says, doesn't touch some of the, more regional parts of the country. I think, there are costs involved in putting in a new terminal, particularly when we need to connect into the mainline network. And I think when Network Rail roll out digital signalling, that will help, because the signalling costs of putting new terminals in will be significantly less when a lot more of the signalling is done by the train rather than the track. So I think that's some way off, but I think it will have an opportunity. I think there are also things around digital mapping. So at the moment, for example, we don't have there exists a digital map of the terminal land that we do have. I think if we can, create that, open that up to the market, customers can see where land sites do exist, perhaps where existing terminals have got either adjacent land or underused land where people can share that rail connection. I think there's a huge opportunity there. Often, there is spare land around an existing terminal, and also thinking about how we can make terminals fit for different commodities, because today, we would have a terminal that just does containers or just does aggregates, and thinking about how we might be able to use different technology to help a terminal do both things, perhaps on different days of the week, are also important there. And away from the technology question, I think, there are things around the land use planning system that can help there as well. But yeah, opening up, helping people see what is there, looking at how we can collaborate more around those terminals is a place where digital technology and innovation can really help.
Okay, great. I hope that answers your question, Mike. I think so. Seems like a good answer to me. So I see we have new questions as well. We are posting the one from Chris, as has been voted as well. So also I'm being mindful of the time. I don't want to go over 1 hour. It will be too long hours, I think, for everyone. So if you want also to upvote one of the two new questions that we have, so we can choose between the two of them. In the meantime, Chris' question is: does growth entail increasing Great Britain freight train maximum operating speed, or will the focus for the foreseeable future be increased train length, assuming that increasing individual wagon masts will prove difficult?
Yeah, so good question. I think it depends on the market. So in the construction market, I can't see that we will be making the wagons any heavier than they are. The infrastructure won't allow that. Maximum operating speed, I think, is just a complicated question. If you can make freight trains go a lot faster, they will fit on the network with the passenger trains better. You might have a capacity gain, but there are, I think, 3 questions really around that. One is, what does it take to make them go faster? It must be possible, but how expensive would it be if we did? Secondly, there are some questions around aerodynamics, particularly where trains aren't fully loaded and we get gaps. And thirdly, I think there's a piece around how the network is passed. Spending money to go faster just to be sat in a passing loop for a longer amount of time doesn't work. So we need to know that we'd actually deliver a benefit from that. But I think there are people out there starting to look at the question to unpack it a little bit.
Yeah, and I think at the same time, you kind of also answered a question from Mike, but also regarding the opportunity to have faster journey times. I guess it's kind of same question, or at least the elements of your answer are kind of answering these. We can go longer into it afterwards if you wish, Maggie. In the meantime, I think we're going to take Robert's question. Again, voted 2 times. This one is about what role do you see third-party financing playing in delivering rail infrastructure schemes directly beneficial to rail freight end users, if there is. Sure.
So, I mean, let's be clear that all the examples I've given you today are being funded by I think what we call third-party financing, private sector investment. It's not, of all the schemes that I've talked about today, the only government money that's gone into them is obviously the Rail Safety and Standards Board's R&D programme is funded by the government, but all the other schemes are being funded by the private sector. I think if you look at the core rail infrastructure, which I guess is where Robert's question is, the tracks and trains that Network Rail have, do I see, other parties investing in that? I think it is possible. But actually, end users would say, well, I don't have to pay for the motorway network, so why should I have to pay for the rail network? These are big infrastructure schemes. So if we have to pay more because of that, then I think that is a challenge. But I think that there are definitely some places where we've got freight-only branch lines or things like that, where there might be some opportunities as well. And I think, to Mike's point, I think if we can get more electric locos running, and people are beginning to order more electric locomotives, bi-mode, electric diesel, then that will also help with acceleration, which can be, as much of a challenge sometimes as in terms of fitting onto the network as the actual running speed itself.
Okay, great. Then that's the end of our questions. Good job. You answered 4 of them in a record time. So if no one else has any more question, I can pop up our own contacts. You have just a few minutes if someone has a very quick question to ask right now. Else, please, before you leave, take the time to answer the last poll regarding if you enjoyed this RailTech Masterclass. On my side, I greatly enjoyed listening to Maggie, and thank you for spreading the knowledge. Always very appreciated, especially coming from me as I'm new to rail. I love talking to people that have a lot of experience. Also thank you to our audience for participating in the polls and asking questions. As I said, you will receive the replay of the webinar by email either today or tomorrow. And here you can type in our contacts if you have follow-up questions for any of us, or if you want more info. We'll be very happy to enter them. And I think I can see you all. Let you have lunch. I wish you bon appetit. And once again, thank you very much, Maggie, for your participation. It was truly appreciated.
Pleasure. Thank you for arranging it.